I want to ask you, like, in the specifics, you mentioned earlier, I want to kind of loop back to, like, you're in the practice room, you're like, digging into certain stuff, sort of mastering it to iterate on it. What does that actually look like? If you can bring like a period of your life where you're into this or that drummer or musician, are we talking about like you're learning transcriptions or you're taking a pattern and you're moving it around? Like technically, that's the mystery I and many people would have is like, how do you specifically, what technical work gets you where you are?
Yeah. Well, just like anyone, I mean, I went through the pain wall years of things like stick control, things like the Ted Reed language, learning the rudimental, the ritual, the Alan Dawson thing. I had teachers and a couple of great teachers, and then, but for me, I also am a very natural sort of autodidact personality. Like I would dive in myself. Just my education based on listening to as much music as I could. And from a pre-streaming, even pre-CDs era, and not having the money to go buy records all the time, and I would go to the library and check out records and just devour albums, devour languages, listen at night, listen overnight, fall asleep to the music, almost like decide on a language. I was gonna know Miles Smiles. I was gonna know it. So it's gonna be on my turntable as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old. I'm just gonna leave it on side A for 2 weeks at a time.
And then you would be shedding what you hear.
Yep. And I would sit there and just be like, okay, well, a lot of times I would isolate. I'm gonna just play the ride cymbal. One thing for me is always isolate too. I would pull cymbals away from the drums and I'd be like, I'm gonna try and make things happen. That's why I do a lot of things, even when I'm soloing, quote unquote, or doing clinics or anything like that. A lot of times I won't play cymbals very often. That comes from that. Is developing melodic patterns, developing these things, but then also having the rudimental background, a stick control background, a snare drum etude, background, but always coming from a place of I'm discovering it. So I'm saying, I had teachers that were on me for different things, and of course, just being able to like play, just sort of like straight ahead era jazz or all these other things, or being able to play backbeats in time. Like I said, I spent years playing in groups that use sequencers. I played a lot of rock music and pop music as well, and done records where I've got to play the click tracks and I've got to do those things. So playing to a metronome at a certain amount of time, but then ditching the metronome. For instance, I've never played to a metronome while I'm playing like jazz time or things like that. But like I'll use a metronome for just this is of course not profound, but like just rudimental practice. I still do this. So to this day, I sit with a pad and throw a metronome on, and I'll just improvise rudimental sequences. Nothing profound there, nothing any different from anybody else would do. Or if it was something I was working on, whether it be like bell patterny kind of things, applications of certain types of West African rhythms that I've been really into. Of course, that I've just devoured Ed Blackwell and all those patterns when I was a kid, and I love the melodic aspect, the sort of marching tritom aspect of things. I like to use themes. I'll think to myself like, what if I solo in this sort of grand marching band drum corps vibe, even though I'm not coming from a drum corps tradition, but like my soloing will be that all of a sudden. The way that I'll put that in a mixed media way on some jazz gig or some whatever. I joke about it during my thing, Rational Funk, my show, Rational Funk. I joke about mixing medium in the form of that, but actually there's very serious undertones to that. This idea that just because this is this way, does that mean I can't use that in some sort of modern contextualized experiment? So I practiced that stuff. I used to practice isolated time, and then I would, learn patterns just like anybody else. Learn things. I'd be like, oh, that's an interesting thing. Who's doing that? And then manipulate that. At the end of the day, that's never been a thing for me to recall a pattern I know I'm going to nail, and I'll use that here. It's much more interesting to me to then be put in a position where if I'm going to fill, I want it to be somehow personal. And that comes from just trial and error of just like, well, that works. That doesn't work so much. But then you got to get some feels and some bags together. I mean, when I joined Julian's band, I really had to get back to playing some really good shuffles and things. Because he's coming from a tradition that uses a lot of blues shuffles and things like that. And being a fan of all this music, being a fan of a lot of the blues music that he came out of the guitar music and all these things. Being a fan of Muddy Waters, being a fan of all these people. Sun House, all these things. I wasn't sitting down every day playing a bunch of blues shuffles on the drums, Chicago shuffle or whatever. I wanted to be able to personalize that stuff too, but I had to get back in there and be like, oh man, I have up-tempo shuffles. Not, you don't just sit down and play that with great feel. You got to like have respect for that and get back in there and deal. So, I mean, very structured practice as a young person and still to this day, but always leaving room for the maybe and the drama. That's how I try to approach the difference between performance. Is I try to make sure I don't sound like I'm playing everything I've already worked out. And that's how I can be critical of some of the great musicians of today. There could be so many brilliant players out there, but you've heard one record, then you hear everything they've said. Like, well, it doesn't ever sound like this person ever goes for anything else.